I was going to talk a little bit about who I am in terms of our clinic. I'm a reproductive endocrinologist that's in Dallas, Texas. I have two other female physicians that are with me. We do a lot of in vitro fertilization, egg donor, surrogacy. We have actually 3 offices, but our main office is in Frisco, which is a small suburb north of Dallas. In terms of a little bit about me, I think that y'all probably heard, in our introductions. I went into fertility because I enjoy it, and I think that for the most part you can make people very, very happy. But more than that, I truly believe it. It's that when you see a couple in terms of taking them through the process of having a baby, literally I thought myself that I knew all about life and all about having kids and this and that until I had my own kids. I have 2 boys that are 8 and 9. It wasn't really until then that I really had an understanding in terms of the process. And part of that for me, in terms of doing that, is helping. I think that everybody should have the ability to have kids. And I know that for guys, as opposed to, and we take care of a lot of heterosexual couples as well as same-sex women, but it's much easier logistically for guys. There's a lot of ropes that you have to jump through, and so our goal is really to make the process as easy as it can be, and relatively and successful. It starts off really in terms of when you're looking at the process. Obviously, it's about relationships, and one of the relationships is when you look at this as opposed to like a heterosexual couple going through, is that there's so many more involved parties, and I think that we do a very good job in terms of communication and in terms of success, which is really what it ultimately depends on. I've always been struck by people talking about how high their success rates are and this and that, whatever, but I think that ultimately it has to be really the real deal, and we are known for having high success rates, particularly with egg donors, because we have a very good lab. And while the physician is an important component of it, the embryologist is actually is very component. And so, for example, we have a program for couple, for people that go through that that covers, that if they don't get pregnant, that we give them 70% of their money back from the medical component. Obviously, the surrogacy part we don't really cover, because we have, usually for the most part work with agencies, and we can do that. And we can do that particularly with egg donors because we know what our success rates are. So you can say, and so I think that, because ultimately you need to have something to show for what you're doing, as opposed to just going through the process. And so I just kind of wanted to, in terms of a backdrop, in terms of that. It really starts off with a discussion, whether it's a phone call or a Skype consultation or whatever with me. I do most in terms of with the same-sex couples. I'm the one that's primarily involved in that, and we kind of talk about what y'all are interested in, specifics about the the medical component of it, which is usually relatively straightforward. The other part of it is obviously in terms of picking out a agency, or somebody to find a gestational carrier, which is an important component, and then obviously the egg donor, which is a important component. We have a in-house egg donor program, and in part we have that because we try to control to as much as we can in terms of the other parties that are involved, because I do this every day, but I know that when initially it's kind of mind-boggling when you talk about there's all these different terms that are thrown out to you, and it's very confusing, and you want somebody that's going to be, that's going to tell you the truth. It's almost like, and literally, and it's obviously there's a business component to medicine, now, but at the same time, I truly feel like that you should be treated just like, a brother, literally, in terms of the, you want to have something to show for what you're doing. So, with that being said, I mean, obviously we use agencies for the egg donor part, but we also have an in-house donor program, and we do that because that's a very important component of it. And it's one thing when you're looking at a profile, you're looking at a picture and things like that, but the thing is just that we want to, then it's kind of like if there's a problem, then you're dealing with us as opposed to dealing with an egg donor agency in terms of if there's a problem with the, with the donor. Because the surrogate is, when you look at the surrogate is usually, it's screened initially through the surrogacy agency before they actually are sent to us, and then but from an egg donor component, the people at least that are on our program, they've done initial medical screening with us, and that is that when you're looking at egg donors, I mean, we're interested in, typically they're women ages 21 to 29. We can do an ultrasound to take a look at their ovaries, to look at what we call the antral follicle count, and we can do lab work such as like an AMH level, which is a lab test that basically gives you a rough idea of how many eggs you're going to get. And then the other component is really the, that's very objective, but then the other part is personality-wise of the donor. Is that somebody that you can see yourself, that you want to, you can not necessarily see yourself using, but in terms of, that is someone that has qualities that are kind of, that you would want to have in an egg donor, because not that the gestational carrier is not an important component of it, because the relationship which, that you'll develop with a carrier is very important, but it's not in terms of the qualities. It's totally different qualities in terms of the egg donor, which is basically a very, very, very important part. So we have our own egg donor program, and then we also use agencies, because primarily we are not, that's not our main job in terms of being an egg donor program, but I mean, there are Dallas is like, also big hair, people, and I won't say big hair, but I'll say the people have very specific qualities that they're wanting for a donor, a certain height, and all kind of different, different characteristics, and we can't go through and, that spends a lot of time, and so there are agencies that are available that are very, very good that can help you, through that process, and that we have a good relationship with, because we, I mean, there's certain criteria even in terms of for us when we're working with an agency that we look for and that we really require, because we're basically, putting ourselves on the line when we're using a donor from an agency, because it affects ultimately our success rates. If you have someone that's not responsible, it's not showing up to their appointments, and things like that, then that's that ultimately affects us. So we're relatively strict in terms of that criteria. Typically, the process again talks with a consultation, and then typically we would connect you with a surrogacy program that would do that. And then we also, somebody would, y'all would be, after you talk with the doctor, that you would be meeting with or we have a nurse that that couples develop a very close relationship with, because you have to feel like that when you're calling. I mean, medicine has this kind of aura that, you know, you're calling the doctor and all this other stuff, but in this process, it's different really, and it's different because you should feel very comfortable when you talk to the, you know, we have one nurse, this is really all she does, and it involves communication. You want to know what's going on, you want to know, you know, when the person's having their ultrasound, when they're having their screening, when you see the surrogate, and kind of through the, you know, through the whole process. So typically, in y'all's case, y'all basically, after you would have a, you know, a consultation, when you came to the States, that would be a time when you would really, in most instances, you'd be meeting the carrier at the same time. Typically, we have people come in like the night before, maybe have dinner with the carrier, get to know her, and then y'all both come in together. And I would see I would see you individually, and then both together to make sure that everybody was, you know, was very well aware of the process. And then for the guys, typically we would have them cryopreserve sperm, and so we have your sperm there. We can do, there's certain testing that's pretty very standard that would be done, and that's the sperm that we'd be using in terms of when you go through the cycle. At the same time, the gestational carrier would have certain testing done. She's already had testing, a preliminary review in terms of, you know, we've typically have already looked at her records, her obstetrical records. There's certain requirements that, you know, that you typically would look for when you're looking for a carrier, someone that's already had at least one child, that is not, you know, that has a BMI that's not over, you know, 30, 35, that doesn't smoke, that, you know, that's responsible, and that's not doing it really for the money. Yes, there's a financial component for that, but most of the time you'll find that when you meet women, and hopefully you meet this as someone that really feels like they're doing a mitzvah. They're making a difference, and they vary, and that's why they're doing that. So medical screening, they have to have an examination, you know, pap smear, and then we do some measurements in terms of like their uterus to make sure we know where to place the embryo, and that's done at that time. They would then meet with the nurse, and the nurse basically does a lot of the coordination in terms of with the gestational carrier, and sets up them seeing a counselor that's required, and then either, typically not at the same time, at a different time, then we would see the egg donor. The egg donor, again, if they're part of our program, then we've already know a lot about them, but there are certain requirements the egg donor would do as well. They need to have a physical examination. First thing, they fill out it's probably a 20-page application in terms of even before they can become an egg donor, and it goes through what colors they like, what type of music they listen to, as much information as you would want in terms of give you some idea in terms of what they're about. They would also then have lab work done like we talked about, and then they would also meet with the nurse who would go through the make sure that they feel that they totally understand the process. The real deal is that actually, you know, the agency typically would then have you either you would use a lawyer through us, or the agency has a lawyer that would do the legal work, and then the real deal is the process. So that's kind of a general idea of what, you know, of what it's about. If y'all would like, I can go through the actual process of it, the medical part of it, if you're interested in that. But I think that if when I talk to people, and even people that y'all would be interested, or you could talk to that have gone through, I mean, I think that, you know, what separates us is our staff. We have a very good staff that, and they're very committed to this process, and the reward and the reason why they're committed to it is because it's a life-changing experience. I mean, you never really think you could love something so much until you have kids, and it makes it. And I think the people that you find that are involved in that, that's really why they do that. Questions? I'm very laid back. Hopefully I wasn't talking too fast. But I'm open for, any questions about, about anything really.
Could you tell us a little bit about the rough estimates for the price?
Pardon me?
The price, the cost of the process.
The cost of the process. We have it depends on whether you're using a donor that's part of our program or a donor through an agency, through an agency. So you're asking specific numbers in terms of what it is, but typically
Some rough estimates.
rough estimate for if someone uses a donor from our program, then then we charge $21,000, and I have to tell you, actually, when there's someone obviously that y'all can talk to that would be able to talk to you, it's $21,000. There's someone that y'all can talk to on the phone or Skype, a financial counselor that would go through that. Because obviously, finances are not are an important component of it. But that, if you're not using a donor from our program, then obviously it would be less because we obviously have to have to compensate the donor. I know that one thing that is very that has been striking to me is how expensive it is, and I feel like that it should be, that it should be an option for people to, that the cost itself should not be, should not prohibit people from, going through. I think that there are certainly places that are, that are a lot more, expensive than us. One of the things is just Texas is you probably have heard that financially that the costs in Texas are less than it is like on the East Coast or the West Coast, and that allows us to do things that are not as expensive from a salary perspective, what we have to pay our staff, to rents and things like that. I think that the other part that I was going to say, which I think is important for you to do, is that in the States, we have to report our success rates to an organization, and we, have done relatively well in terms of, in terms of success. And part of that is because we've invested a lot in our lab. Our facility is like 7,600 square feet. We have 2 operating rooms. We have a PhD embryologist, and we, and that's allowed us to grow at the rate we've done it, to really offer some of the programs that we've been able to offer. One thing I'll be quite honest with you, I've had people, and I think this when you look at other places that are they're a lot more expensive, and maybe because of it's very interesting. It's I really think that it should, that some people feel like that if you pay more that it's better. It's almost like we literally, and I know because we've kind of been struggling with this. So people say that you should that have been other places and been at your program, and they're like, why don't charge more? But it's like that. It's really it's a struggle for us because I think we've done really well, but it's like that. I'm not right now caught up in this idea in terms of that it should be really, really expensive. There are places that you have that do unlimited IVF and do frozen embryo transfers and all this other stuff. But and obviously that may be an option that you may want to consider. But for what in y'all's, for instance, when you're using an egg donor, and you shouldn't have to go through 3 cycles of IVF for it to happen, because it's a lot of money that you would be spending for that, and so that's not. So we typically don't. We don't do that. But in terms of cost, we have someone that we try to work with with people. We have a financial counselor that can talk to people about financing if that's really a consideration.